Hi, my name is Kayla and I'm here at the Compost Education Centre. We're on the unceded and occupied Coast Salish territory of Lekungen people, specifically the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Today we are going to talk about planning your garden. So there's some main questions you want to ask yourself, like how much time do you have? So if you've got ample time this summer and you're not planning any holidays, then you might be able to plan to start a bigger garden. If you plan to be away here and there and you work full time, then starting with something really small will ensure that you experience success this year so that next year you feel even more inspired to do your gardening. Notice your site. Where is the sun? Where does it fall at different times of the year? This will help you determine where you're going to plant certain plants, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Overall, vegetables really like the sun, so the sunnier the spot in your yard is probably where you're going to want to site your vegetable garden. Where's your water source? Do you have a long enough hose to reach where you want to site your garden? Or is there a rain barrel that's sited nearby that you can access to use to water your vegetables? Notice what deer and vermin are in your neighborhood. These are things that can really be sad to experience as a first-time gardener or as an anytime gardener, and do put up some sort of enclosure or exclosure for vermin so that you don't have to deal with deer coming in and eating up all of your veggies. And then another thing you're going to want to ask yourself is, do you want to grow directly in the soil? Do you want to grow in containers? Do you want to build a raised bed? By far the best soil that you're going to have is the stuff that's below your feet. So oftentimes growing directly in the soil can be best. But if you're concerned about soil contamination or the health of the soil, the history of the soil in which you're growing upon, then you might want to build a raised bed. I'll talk a little bit more about soil in a little bit. Raised beds can be fantastic for growing here, especially if you also have shallow soil, if the bedrock is quite close. And containers can work fairly well as well. So if you're in an apartment or a condo, then you can also grow directly into containers. Or even if you're a renter, growing in containers is a fantastic way to experience growing your own food for the first time. Now we are going to talk about soil, because it all begins with the soil. If possible, try and get your soil tested. There's a lab on the Saanich Peninsula called MB Labs where you can get your soil tested for the macronutrients of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and pH. This can help us determine what to add to the garden in terms of an amendment. If that's not affordable or available to you, that's okay. You can always add organic matter, and I'll talk more about that in just a second. The best soil is what you got. So dig down into the soil that you have that's already there and explore it. So literally, when you have soil in your hands, look at it, see if you see any life. Smell it. Does it smell sweet? That's a good sign. If it smells really bad, then that might be a sign that something's off. Feel it, touch it, get acquainted with your soil. Ultimately, you can never go wrong with adding organic matter to your soil. So what is organic matter? That comes in the form of compost. So if you don't already have a compost bin going, get a compost bin going. Lots of resources on how to do that in my previous video on composting and mulching, or on the Compost Education Centre's website. So add compost to your garden. Keep your soil covered with mulch. That means using leaves from the city of Victoria, the leaf mulch that they have, or straw. Keep your soil covered nearly the entire year. The only time you want to have your soil uncovered is in the spring when you're letting the soil warm up and seeds germinate. As soon as those seedlings germinate, tuck them in with some mulch. You're moderating the soil temperature, the soil moisture, you're keeping weeds down, and that stuff will decompose and integrate into the soil ecosystem and support plant growth. You might want to replenish your nutrients in your soil with that compost mulch, but also animal manure. Make sure the animal manure is well composted before you're adding it to your soil. In the spring is a good time to do that. You might want to plant cover crops. And those are things that you plant in the fall, and they add a significant amount of organic matter to your garden as well. The best form of organic matter is stuff that's free, like our food waste that you can turn into compost and add to the garden, or you can dig it in and do trench composting, or collect all the leaves that are available from deciduous trees that fall in the autumn time. Collect those up and use those as mulch, use them in your compost bin. Basically, we want to breed microbes in the soil. We want to bring life into the soil so it can help the whole system work well, and your plants will almost grow on their own if your soil is really healthy. One last thing I'll add in is that nitrogen fixers are handy in the garden. So growing things like peas and beans, not only can we eat them, but they fix nitrogen. They take atmospheric nitrogen and they sink it into the soil through a relationship in their root system with bacteria in the soil. So those are some ways that we can begin with the soil when we're starting our garden. Now we're going to talk about choosing what to plant and where. So if you're starting growing for your very first time, there's certain crops that grow really easily and that produce a lot. So things like lettuces, radishes, peas and beans. You can get a lot of abundance, potatoes as well, a lot of abundance quite quickly, and they're fairly easy to grow. Certain things require a lot more sun and heat, like tomatoes. We're here in the greenhouse. Got cucumbers and tomatoes and hot peppers. They tend to like a really hot and sunny spot. So choose the sunniest and warmest space in your yard to site things like these crops that really like a lot of heat. Same with sweet potatoes. If you're going to go for okra, winter or summer squash, melons, corn, those things all require a lot of sun and a lot of warmth. So choose to plan your garden so that the sunniest spot has those crops in it. There's certain crops that can do okay with less light and less heat. Those are things like leafy greens, arugula, Asian greens, chard, kale, lettuce, spinach, culinary herbs. All of those things can do all right in lower light and lower heat conditions. Bush beans and peas, as well as root veg, they can handle a little bit less of the heat and light as well. Just know that if you have a really shady garden and it only receives a few hours of sunlight a day, your plants will take a lot longer to grow, and they might also just be generally slower, and you might get less abundance from those plants. But it's always worth giving it a shot, giving it an experiment. Know that the sunniest space of your garden is the one that the veggies are likely going to like the most. Record keeping and info sourcing. So as you're getting going on your gardening journey, you're probably gonna want more knowledge and want to learn more, and there's tons out there. So definitely check out the Compost Education Centre's website, compost.bc.ca, and growingfood-together.com has lots of videos just like this on how to get going on growing your own food. In terms of your own record keeping, really encourage you to start a garden journal. Write down what you did when you did it so that you can make reference to it next year. Also keep really good records of what you planted where so that next year you can get into crop rotation, and I'll talk about that in a second. So start a garden journal if you don't already have one going. Also make reference to the West Coast Seeds vegetable planting chart. It's really helpful for beginners and experienced gardeners alike because it can tell you at what time of year to plant the different vegetables, when the soil will be at the proper temperature, if things need to be started indoors, or if you can direct seed them right into the garden. Read your seed packages. So there's usually a lot of information on seed packages. West Coast Seeds is one that has tons of information on the seed packages. It'll tell you about timing, it'll tell you how big it gets, it'll tell you when to seed it, how it grows, the germination rate. There's tons of information out there, and if you're ever wondering what a certain thing means, like OP or F1 on your seed package, open pollinated versus hybrid, the internet is totally full of information that you can look that up on. Open pollinated seeds, though, just to tell you, can be saved, and they make really good options for saving seed, whereas a hybrid seed you don't want to save, because the next year when you plant it will likely not be the same. Choose local seeds when you can. So this is Full Circle Seeds, there's a Chosen Farm Seeds, Saanich Organics, Salt Spring Island Seeds, tons of good local seed growers who are growing really high quality seed that is suited to growing in this region. While you might have success with seed from another area of Canada or the world, these seeds will really grow the best here because they've been conditioned to grow in this region, and these seed farmers do a fantastic job. Really focus on knowing your plants. So if you're planting beans, know if they're climbing beans or bush beans. If they are climbing beans, they will need to be trellised. If they are bush beans, not as much. So read about the different varieties that you're planting. Same goes for tomatoes. Some are vining tomatoes, which will need support. Others are more determinate bush variety tomatoes that won't need quite as much support. So yeah, check out more videos like this, and check out the Compost Education Centre's website for lots of our fact sheets and other information and workshops that we have available. So now I'm going to talk about crop rotation, a really good practice to ensure soil health and plant health. The reason why we rotate crops or crop families around the garden is to ensure that the nutrients are being cycled through the garden, so that a particular plant family isn't taking the same nutrients from the same spot year after year, and also to minimize the pressure from pests and diseases. If we grow something in the same spot year after year, those plants are going to be more susceptible to pests and diseases. So there's 4 main families that you're going to want to rotate in your garden. The tomato family, which includes tomatoes, potatoes, tomatillos, peppers. These need to be rotated through the garden. And that's mostly for nutrient cycling purposes. The onion family as well needs to be rotated through the garden because of a prevalent disease that grows in this region. White rot, it's called. So that's garlic, onions are the main ones that you'll probably be growing. The cabbage family is another really important thing to rotate through the garden. And this is a huge family. It's things like kales, rutabaga, turnips, broccolis, cabbages, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts, etc. I would look it up to see if it's in the cabbage family. Clubroot is a real thing in this region, and by rotating crops, we're gonna keep the soil less susceptible to that clubroot. The fourth family is the carrot family. So parsnips, parsley, celery, celeriac, dill, and cilantro, those need to be moved through the garden as well year after year. So ideally these four plant families will not be grown in the same area for 4 years. So that means this year I've got my tomatoes and potatoes here, the tomato family. Next year I'm gonna have them here. And then the year after I'm gonna have them back there, and then the year after there, and then it's not until the 4th year that I'll be back in this zone. Same goes for onion family, cabbage family, and carrot family. You're gonna wanna rotate them in a 4-year cycle. There's a few plant families that you can tuck in and around these 4 main families that need to be rotated. So the goosefoot family, like beets and chard, those can be planted anywhere in the garden year after year because they're not as susceptible to nutrient needs and pest and disease needs. Same with the lettuces, spinaches, beans and peas are nitrogen fixers, and you can plant them wherever you need to in the garden year after year without being worried about rotating those particular crops year after year. Companion planting. So there's lots of plants that we can grow in the garden to support the health of other plants. Mostly what I try and focus on in the garden here at the Compost Education Centre is growing insectaries. So plants that attract insects to them, attract beneficial insects that will help to scare off some of the less attractive insects. So plants like borage and calendula, marigolds, phacelia, letting cilantro go to flower, cosmos, marigolds, these are all things that are really helpful to attract beneficial insects to the garden and that will support the pollination of your plants, but also to fend off some of the less desirable insects. There's other things that are out there, like growing basil with tomatoes is said to increase the flavor of your tomatoes. So I encourage you to do some follow-up research on what plants particularly grow really well with one another. Thanks so much for tuning into this video about planning your garden. I highly encourage you to check out the Compost Education Centre workshops. You can find us on our website, compost.bc.ca, and also check out the multitude of resources, other videos and information that's available on growingfood-together.com. Thanks so much for watching.